Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Becky Robinson. I'm here today with Bella Rushi, and we're getting ready for our webinar, The Innovative Executive, Leading Intelligently in the Age of Disruption. And our world and all of our systems and processes and products are adapting so quickly. It's hard to keep up. And so I'm really excited to learn with Bella Rushi today. And I'm so pleased that you've chosen to spend an hour learning with us. As you're coming into today's webinar, I want to welcome you to use the chat. You can find it in the bottom of your Zoom panel, and we would love for you to say hello. Let us know where you're calling in from today. It might be morning, it might be afternoon, it might be evening, depending on where you are in the world. We would love to hear from you. And if you happen to be attending today's webinar event as part of your ongoing professional development, potentially you're representing an organization today, go ahead and let us know in the chat as well what organization you're representing so we can give you a shout out. And I would encourage you to please use the drop down menu to select everyone so that everyone can see your comments. And then throughout today's event, you also can put any questions that you might have for Bella. And later on in today's broadcast, we will have the chance to get to your questions. So I want to say welcome to Saw Francis in New York City. Welcome to Jane in Michigan, to Bridget in Southwest Ohio, Susan in Phoenix. Welcome to Alicia in Humboldt, Texas, Orange, California. Gary, it's always good to see you on our events. Hi in Minneapolis, Bill. At San Antonio, we have a caller from Ukraine. We have one from Santiago de Chile, Pittsburgh, Massachusetts. Amazing. And thank you so much for joining. It looks like we have someone from Portugal, someone from Seattle. We have someone in Australia, and who even knows what time it is in Australia? Jane mentioned that she listens to your podcast, Bella, and that she's looking forward to the webinar. So thank you so much to all of you who have been joining us. And in a few moments, I want to get your feedback on a couple of polls so that we can learn more about you as we dive into learning. But first, I do want the chance to introduce Bella to you formally. I've been working with Bella for several months, and always, as I was saying on the Facebook broadcast before we went live with the webinar, I always learn something from Bella. Her new book, The Innovative Executive, launched earlier this year, and she brings her 20 plus years experience in pharma and the life sciences to be able to advise life science and consumer product companies on growth strategies, customer engagement, channel development, innovation assessments, and ideation workshops. So before we got started this morning, Bella was telling me that she not only does strategy around innovation, but she also helps to manage innovation projects. And so we're going to be able to hear a bit more about what Bella's client work looks like and how she might be able to pour into your organization. But what I love about Bella is that she's passionate about integrating her experience to embed innovation in every part of the organizational process. And she brings a lot of expertise to the world through her Innovative Executive podcast, which helps business leaders create new growth and strengthen their innovation capabilities. So it is an extreme treat to be able to host you today, Bella. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Becky. Thank you so much.
Sure. So let's dive into these polls. We'd like to get to know a bit about you if you've chosen to join the webinar. So I'm going to launch the first poll. We're curious about your level in your organization. Do you consider yourself a C-suite leader, someone at the executive level, someone at the director level, someone who's a manager, or other? And we are going to give you a few moments to answer that poll so that as we talk today, Bella can more accurately adjust her comments to fit your role in your organization. If you happen to type other as your selection, let us know in the chat what your role in your organization is, and that will help us as well. Okay, let's take a look. It looks like we have a few members here who represent the C-suite or the executive level, about 13% of you. We have some directors on the call. We have a lot of managers, nearly 40% of you are managers, and about a third of you say other. So we are going to be looking for your feedback in the chat if you want to tell us what other stands for. And we have one more poll for you today. We are curious to hear about what industry you work in. And some of you are telling us in the chat. Do you work in manufacturing, in healthcare, in retail, in technology, or other? And if it's other, again, we would welcome your feedback in the chat so we can learn a bit more about you. Looks like we have some project leads on the call. We have some senior technical people on the call. We have an MBA student working in the medical field. We have an admin on the call. We have some educators on the call. We have some government workers on the call. We have a National Weather Service meteorologist who's masquerading as a hydrologist. Wow. Account management, public library, public utility, airport authority, higher ed, management consulting, financial services. You know what is occurring to me, Bella, as I read all of these different areas, that every single one of these types of verticals that people are working in, every single one needs innovation. Do you agree?
That's correct. They do. And it's nice to see that everyone from lots of different industries are here.
Yeah, so let's end this poll. It looks like we do have 60% of people saying other, and thank you for those who are letting us know in what areas you work. 15% of people representing technology, 13% health, and 7% manufacturing. So thank you for sharing your feedback with us. As we dive into the conversation, it will help us to adjust our examples and conversation. So again, thank you for being here. Well, Bella, let's dive into the content. I can't wait to learn with you. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, your new book came out earlier this year, and it is a powerful guide for leaders in today's world. So, you know, obviously the need for innovation is something that we hear a lot about. We definitely live in an age of disruption. So tell me why this is so important. It's something we can't ignore.
Sure. So, Becky, we saw that, during the pandemic, that the companies that were strategically invested in capabilities, they had updated their processes, they were involved in using a technology-driven strategy. They were able to navigate through the pandemic. And this allowed them to be more opportunity focused and more flexible. And the companies that didn't have good investments in their capabilities and strengthened their understanding of the customers, they were struggling, right? So they were actually being disrupted. And the landscape right now is just changing really fast. And companies who are just focusing on products is just not good enough today. Customers are looking for experience, and they're looking to have the companies, meet their demands because they have higher aspirations. So using older business models is not going to work today. We really need a new way of thinking, and to have a new way of thinking, we can't, solve newer problems. We need the newer way of thinking. So innovation right now is very critical, and I believe that many companies are learning to innovate, and they're looking to build a more innovative culture. But we really have to ask ourselves, a few things when we start with innovation, and that is what is that, who are we today? Who are we going to become tomorrow? And how do we start that change? And this is really important to do, because the biggest risk is that when there's no action taken at all.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering, as a follow-up, Bella, when you were talking, I was thinking about, you've likely seen some companies thrive in this period of disruption through the pandemic and others flop. So would you be willing to share with us, what comes to mind for you when you think about companies that really did innovate well during the pandemic to get out ahead of their competition?
Yeah, absolutely. So many companies that really were flexible are the ones that were quickly able to get onto e-commerce, right? Or that they had a e-commerce channel, but it wasn't their main focus. Or many companies, like some furniture companies, had no e-commerce channels at all, and they were quickly able to get onto an e-commerce channel because they knew everybody was working from home, right? So it's the flexibility and the adaptability of these companies who were able to quickly shift were, navigating properly and were able to thrive in this market. Obviously, tech companies did really well. That was, everybody knows that Zoom, and you have, Netflix, and all the things we love, Disney Plus and whatnot. But, the companies that really understood that we really need to change, and they have strong capabilities inside, and they had the talent to support it, they were really able to make that change very fast.
Well, I'm thinking about, for those on the call who don't represent like a large tech company, I even saw some examples of even like mom and pop type, local restaurants some were able to adapt and others not. Like we have this restaurant around the corner and they, innovated with offering these like do it yourself taco kits for takeout that they never had before. So, it seems to me like there's like a wide range of what innovations are possible. It's just being awake to what your customers might need. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you could tell us more about this idea of street vendor tech thinking, which you talk about in the book, and what are the things that leaders can learn from this, idea of street vendors?
Yeah, absolutely, Becky. So in my book, I do talk about, me being a street vendor with my dad. So basically, I was selling newspapers as a kid, and this experience really allowed me to understand market demand, really understanding to know who your customers are, how to think ahead of them, understanding the external factors that they can come at you at any time, at any place. And this is all happening in the front line. So when you start having this mindset of being adaptable and being flexible, then you can navigate, right, when disruption happens, right, or when things are not going your way. So for business leaders and companies, they, in order for them to survive in this uncertain world, because the landscape is changing so quickly, they have to be adaptable and flexible and driven like a street vendor, right? So they can't continue to create these rigid plans for strategies and then expect them to roll them out in 6 months or a year and things be okay, because you don't know if external factors are going to hit, right? So street vendors, I think, are great examples of entrepreneurs who are always ready for the market. And there's this connection between entrepreneurship and innovation, right? So it promotes greater flexibility and adaptation, because they understand that they have to iterate their processes constantly and experiment with their customer before they take anything out. And this basically is really a mindset to have, to become more opportunity focused and not issue focused.
Yeah, I love that idea of shifting to being opportunity focused and thinking ahead to what opportunities that we can create as the world is changing, because change is hard, even in the best of times. So, why do you think it's hard for business leaders, especially ones who are not necessarily entrepreneurs, but business leaders in established businesses? Why is it so hard for them to rethink their business models? And what can we do about that?
Yeah, sure. So we know, like, everywhere change is hard, right? And that there's what happens with change is that, right now there's a lot of uncertainty with the landscape and the markets. So when you have a lot of uncertainty, um, business leaders don't want to make any changes. But what happens is that leads to fear of failure, because they don't want to try new things. They're afraid to try new methods. They're afraid to experiment or do even long-term planning with their resources. So to overcome uncertainty, what we really need is data, right? We need to start collecting data. And in my book, I give so many examples of lots of companies, as well as companies I've worked with, that collect data for the future, right? So when you have data about your current market, you have data about your customers and what their journey looks like, or what it possibly could look like, it really helps to plan better. I think, one of the examples, one of my favorite examples I like is the Porsche example, where they, introduced the Cayenne model. And, it took them years to get this SUV out when Porsche created this SUV, but the idea came, long time ago, right? The idea came where they needed to first say, okay, we're a sports car company. Do we make SUVs? Do families actually drive our cars? So really, they really needed to understand the customer and really plant the seeds in the customers, have them ready for the SUV. So in the book I talk about, they did sketches and design. First, they introduced like a four-door sedan to see how customers would react to a four-door sedan versus a two-door sports car, right? And then they actually did sketches on, an SUVs in their shops to have customers give feedback on would they even like it or what would they like inside in terms of components. So every little detail was planned out before the car was even made and went to production and market. So really it's about understanding the customer, having the journey with them, having them in the early stages of the innovation process. If you say, is really what's going to help you ensure that when you do get it to the market, it's going to work.
So I was just thinking about this commercial I saw on Hulu, and I don't know if you've seen it, Bella, or if anyone on the call has seen it, but it's about Honda and how Honda started out with dirt bikes and how they innovated. And people said, oh, well, you're never going to be able to build a car because you just build dirt bikes. And then now, all the way till now, they're building these hybrid airplanes. And just how inspiring it is to see a company and their innovation journey. But yet it is that fear of failure that stops us from innovating. So I'm curious, do you have any other examples of clients that you've served who have kind of stepped beyond that fear and
Yeah,
modeled an innovative approach?
absolutely. So, I give many examples in the book, like Bank of America was one of them, who collects data. One of the clients I worked with where, we were making chapstick and, to understand what the customers want in terms of flavors. And here, this was more of a co-creation process with the customers where we built an online platform and really understood what the complaints were or what the customers were thinking about their products. So it wasn't just understanding of what flavors they would like, but they were really also talking about new ways of packaging, which wasn't even something on our radar. So for us to learn that kind of insight is really when you work with the customers to understand what are they thinking to start innovating something new, right? To start bringing something that they're looking for that's going to help them and use it properly.
So asking the customer a lot of questions so that we can build our innovations based on what they're saying they need and want from us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's through processes, right? It takes time as to what data you're collecting, how you're collecting data, and then what stages of the journey you're taking it before you actually bring it into where you're actually going to start the initiatives to create this project and go with it, right? And also you want to understand that when you're working with customers that, is what the problem that you're solving for, is it aligned with your company, right? Is it aligned with your goals and your vision? So, alignment is also a big key because customers can ask for, really interesting things and maybe you're not the right fit for it, right? Because maybe you don't have the capabilities in place to even support that. So really it's understanding your inventory, understanding what your current processes, what your strengths are, looking at everything and making sure everything's aligned with your goals and vision and working with the customer.
That makes sense. So there may be something the customer wants as an innovation from us, but if it's not aligned to the mission of our organization or the vision of our organization or the capabilities of our people, it could be a mistake to try to provide what the customer's asking for.
Well, I mean, right. It depends on what they're asking, right? So if they're asking for something new, you don't want a manager to come back and say, hey, this is what they asked for. Should we just go with this? You actually have to build out a hypothesis and say, hey, this new idea came in from a customer. This is what they're asking. Is this something we can do? Is this something that's going to add value? Or is it just one person that's saying this, right? So when we look at ideas, there are lots of great ideas, but which one is the right idea for your company? Which one is going to add a higher value and impact, the mass market? And are you going to be able to achieve that, right? So you really have to, one of the things we do is, we write hypotheses when we're doing ideation workshops, because you want to look at these ideas and you want to validate them and see if they're going to work, right? So are they going to work in the market? What do we need to do to tweak the problem that we're solving for, or tweak the idea a little bit to make it stronger? So you constantly have to reframe the problems that you're solving to really get to the actual innovation or what you're offering to the customer.
That's helpful. So let's switch for a minute and talk a bit about technology, because so many times when we think about innovation, we're thinking about technology. And you mentioned at the beginning of the call, in the pandemic, companies needed to make a digital transformation to survive. So, what's the role of technology when it comes to managing innovation and sustainable growth for companies? And how does this chief technology officer fit into that?
Yeah, so I mentioned in the book, that there's a chapter on that you have to have a CTO, right? And if you think about it, it makes sense because most of the disruption is happening through technology, right? And the companies who are surviving or thriving right now is because they're using some type of technology strategy in this market to get ahead, to be competitive, or to reach the market first. So when you have a CTO on your team, you're bringing in a set of skills and knowledge that you didn't have before, right? And then this person, he or she can align this technology strategy that they can possibly use with your business goals as to what you're trying to do, what your vision is, right? And they're adding this new support, and they're able to help you to create success. And one of the examples, well, one of my favorite examples I used in the book was the Domino's example. So Domino's, their stock price, I believe in 2008 was $3.85 a share. And in 2021, it went to $478. And this happened because years back, they hired a CTO and they started developing these digital expertise and these plans, right? One of the things they did was to build a pizza tracker. And the pizza tracker was basically to, to make ordering easy and tracking easy. They also built apps and experimented with other digital services. When they're doing this, what they're doing is they're collecting data on their customers, on how they're using this app or the technology, what the complaints are, what the customers are looking forward, and then they're constantly iterating and able to make it better, right? So Domino's is still very relevant. It's was very relevant before, it's very relevant today, and you can tell they're doing well with their stock prices, at least from 2021. And at that, and in 2018, their CEO at that time was Patrick Doyle. He had referred to Domino's as a tech company that sells pizza. So you can tell the mind shift of the company, right? It's not great quality pizza. It's not the best, pizza that you can get on the market. It's we're a tech company, and we're delivering it, right? We're selling pizza. That's what we focus on, and they do it really well, obviously.
Yeah, that is a really interesting kind of shift that they made. And the CTO was a big part of that to promote these digital innovations. So I'm wondering about people who might be coming from a smaller organization. At what point do you need to add a CTO?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're in a smaller organization, I mean, you may not obviously need a CTO, right? But you can definitely use some kind of technology help. There's a lot of services out there, like cloud services, that you can make your processes more efficient, right? You can make your bookkeeping more efficient. So there's ways so you can help your business grow by creating more efficiency with technology. And there's ways that you can find out where technology will work, right? Are you a small company where having an app is going to help you reach your customers better or service them better? So it's really about collecting customer data and figuring out what technology is right for you. And I mean, definitely, you can definitely also, you may not hire a CTO, but you can definitely get the advice from a CTO to see what's been done, and obviously look around your industry, right, and see what others are doing. That also will help you depending on how small your business is and where you fit in.
That's really helpful advice to figure out, if you're a smaller organization, how technology can help you innovate your processes to be more efficient. So let's talk for a minute about the downside, if any, of innovation, because most of the time we talk about innovation as like a good thing, fresh new ideas. So is there a time when innovation is bad, or could you share some stories with us about innovations gone wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. So innovation overall obviously is a good thing, right? When it happens and when you can actually get it to the market, so then you know it's accepted in the market. It is a bad thing you can say, right, when you have failures, right? But the thing about failures is that you learn from the failures and you don't want to have big failures. So there was a lot of failures that we've seen in the past with different companies that we saw products like Google Glass was one of them. There was the Heinz green ketchup. Colgate lasagna was a really interesting one. Um,
What is that?
yeah, so Colgate, the toothpaste company, made lasagna and they thought they can get into the food industry and it didn't work out so well. But hey, again, it goes back to learnings of, okay, will your customers accept this? What happened with that failure? What did we not do before we actually launched it to the market? And if you're using methodologies and framework that help you reduce your risk, right, you won't have an issue where you go to market and there's a huge failure like that. I have worked with some companies where they've produced, products and services for their customers, and they get to the market and they tell us that the customer didn't want it. So, it's gone. And what happens is that, companies the business leaders are very heavily involved in this R&D process, that it took them a certain amount of time to build it, to go through this project, to put the funding in, and now they don't know how to back out or they don't have the right data to collect it or support it. So we see that, and that's the things that you don't want happening today, especially with a very fast moving landscape. You really want to make sure that you're collecting enough data, you're building your hypothesis, you're testing everything out, you're experimenting it, so that by the time you get to market you can tweak as needed, but you won't fail that bad, right? So I think that's what's really important to learn about when you go through an innovation process.
That's super helpful. So let's talk a little bit about the role of collaboration for innovation. So can you expand on the value of collaboration and how collaboration can improve the results that we get for the companies and also just for the world?
Yeah, sure. So, when you think of collaboration, it brings a lot of value because now you're bringing in multiple perspectives in to execute an idea, right? Or even to develop an idea. And I think of it as, two ways. Like one way where when you're managing innovation, you can use external collaboration to explore these unused ideas that you have. And many companies do have these unused ideas that have been sitting around and they don't know what to do with it. It's really valuable to really have external collaboration where you have a collaboration with an example of this would be where a giant company is acquiring a startup, right? Using their expertise to kind of help them tweak this idea out or take it further because they're stuck. We see collaborations all the time and they're, effective. A lot of pharma companies have collaborated with universities to help them develop drugs and do research. We see a lot of tech companies collaborating together. So one example is Intel and IBM. With the shortage of the semiconductor chips, they're collaborating to do more research on this and improve their processes together, right? And maybe build something more innovative than they already have. So collaboration really gives you diverse perspectives and also helps you speed to market, right? Because now you have capabilities from one company and capabilities from another company that you didn't have, and you're putting them together so you have speed to market.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm curious for those who are watching, maybe put in the chat. I think sometimes people are focused less on collaboration and more on competition of, how can we beat our competitors to market? How can we innovate in a way that's going to help us win more customers? And what I hear you saying is that it might be better for the world overall if we find ways to collaborate and have more, maybe an abundance mentality that if we create something better, it's better for everyone. Have you experienced that resistance where people are worried about the competition?
Yeah, so many companies do that, right? They worry about the competition, but then there are companies, they understand that, especially when you look at what happened with the pandemic, right? Not every company was struggling, even though the ones that figured out how to navigate, they were struggling in the beginning, right? They just had stronger capabilities that they were able to put together and they were able to come out of it. But I think they appreciate that when you do collaborate, it's good for the purpose for everyone, right? For society, so it depends on the mindset of the companies and what they're trying to tackle, what problem they're solving. So it's really up to them, but definitely collaboration does have huge benefits than actually being a competitor to that company. Yes.
Thank you for that. So we do have some questions that have been coming into the chat that I want to make sure that we get a chance to go to, and some comments as well. Um, Yvonne says collaboration is essential to innovation and success. Mia says collaboration enables you to design a tighter fit solution than competitors. So it seems like we have some people on the call who are really on board with the idea of collaborating to get to better innovative solutions. But we do have a question from Rodrigo, and he's wondering what's the best model theory framework for leadership development as it relates to like when advocating for leaders to embrace technology and innovation. So do you have recommendations of what people can use? And, you know, maybe it's the model in your book that they can use.
Yeah, so I think it starts with, having a clear vision. So I think one of the things when, leaders are trying to innovate is that, when you have a clear vision and then the communication is the second part and it's communicated all the way down to all your employees. Now everyone is working on the same exact thing. They understand what the goals are for the company. I've seen in my work that you have, ideas at the top, but then, you know, everyone else, the employees are thinking something else. So when there's no alignment as to what the vision is, then everyone is confused. And it's really clarity and communication working its way down to and building the teams and giving them the support to have these projects in place. um, One of the things we've seen that are successful for many companies is when CEOs are really involved in these innovation processes. And what that means is that not on a day-to-day basis, obviously, but that they're really involved in, what does the short term, growth look like? What are our long-term plans look like? We're going to help you build innovation teams. This is the R&D budget. When you have, a governance that's put in place by the CEO, when you have an innovative culture, you allow for failures. They should be small after lots of experiments. You allow for that creativity, and you allow for the communication has to be very clear as to what the CEO is looking to do and how he's making to make that change. And then he has to be able to support that system. So when there's no alignment, it's really hard for change to happen.
Thank you for that. So I'm looking at a question that came in earlier from Greg, and I think it's an interesting question or comment. So your book is called The Innovative Executive, and Greg is wondering how the idea of the innovative executive fits into like, what about innovative organizations, cultures, and employees? So why did you choose to name your book The Innovative Executive instead of like the innovative organization? Why is the executive so critical here?
Yeah, absolutely. So every organization will have a leader, right? And leaders. So when we were naming the book, the initial name of the book was actually going to be the adaptive executive, right? And a leader that can adapt to any type of changing environment. Um, Organizations still need to be run by a leader, right? They need someone to actually show them a clear vision and where they're going. So they need that. They need that to put in place. They need someone to create a dynamic culture so that everyone is aligned and on the same page as to what they're working so hard for, right? And why they're building these products and services. So when there's alignment that's happening and it comes from the leadership level, um, it really helps with the communication, and it really helps with the support system of everything else that you're trying to do, building strategies, new products, building teams, you know, doing collaboration. So that's the reason that we called it the innovative executive.
So everyone looks to the leader, and the leader is the one who can set the path forward for the organization to be adaptable and come up with innovations.
Yeah.
So Bella, we were talking at the beginning about how you not only work on innovation strategy, but also innovation management. And there was one more word that you used that I'm forgetting. But like, would you tell us about one of the most exciting innovation projects you've had a chance to contribute to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I do sign a lot of NDAs, so I can share a few things. The exciting projects, I think, is where that when we present our methodologies and framework, that the clients are understanding that everything is a iterative process, right? You have to test these ideas out with the market to see if it's going to work, and really understanding that they need to have that clear vision. And coaching is one of the most important things that they need to be doing at a manager level, so that they can produce the results that they want to. So when we see a change in the mindset, to me that's exciting, because then I know when the clients are working on their projects and their initiatives, that they're going to be successful, because we were able to change the mindset. So anyone can give you the framework and hand it to you and say, this is the recipe, go ahead and do it. But do you believe it's going to work? Do you believe that, is your whole team aligned? Did you create that dynamic culture? Are you on the front lines with your employees, like the street vendors are with their customers online? So that's what produces that, engagement of the stakeholders and employees and the customers, and everyone is aligned to be able to execute what you want to. And I think for me, that's very rewarding to see.
So let's talk a little bit about co-creating with customers. So you mentioned the importance of collaboration, and collaborating with your customers is something else entirely, and can be really wildly successful for businesses. So tell us a little bit about how an organization would begin to try to co-create innovation with their customers.
So when we think of co-creation, is basically, right, you're having customers early on in your processes to help you create this project and take it to market, right? See if they're going to like it or not. But one of the missing things I've seen from some co-creation work that I've done is that the stakeholders, all the stakeholders are not involved and they're not engaged. So I think the most important thing is to maximize all the stakeholder engagement. And what that really means is that maximizing that the customer is engaged, the production team is engaged, the engineering group, right? Your packaging group, your suppliers, and your employees, that they're all engaged in this project fully. And what that helps is, it helps to give responsibility and accountability to impact and create value to the market when you are finished with this project, because everyone is a stakeholder who is engaged and heavily involved in this process. So for co-creation to be very effective, it's really making sure that all the stakeholders are involved. And I think that's very critical for a co-creation process.
That makes sense. So I'm going to ask if we could do something a little bit crazy here. So, Bella, I've been in business 10 years. I know like there might be people on the call who are part of organizations that have been around 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. So just imagine, not a new company, has a new idea. The leader wants to experiment. Like, walk me through the steps. So from idea to execution. You've talked a little bit about what some of the steps are, but what would we do? Here's an idea for a new service. And then what's the next step? Walk me through, if you're working with the client, how you would take them from the idea to the execution of the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, we're using an innovation process, right? And it's just not selecting a idea, it's selecting the idea, which is the most important thing. So what you want to do is you want to first make sure you have a diverse team and engaging in these ideation process. So we use a platform, an ideation platform that helps us collect all the ideas and cluster them to be able to figure out which ideas are going to work well, right? You also want to build goals on what problem are you trying to solve when you're looking at these ideas, right? So you can't just have random things. You can't have a whole bunch of people in an ideation selection process giving out ideas and they're talking about something else and we're trying to talk about probably solving a technology problem, right? So you want to understand that you're solving for a problem first, you know, enlisting these ideas, and you want to have a diverse group of people from not just your experts, right, but also folks on the front line, also folks, all employees and your suppliers. um, so diversity really does matter, and that's one of the things we've seen, that usually in an ideation process, it's closed doors, or they take the best few ideas and then you know, someone in an expert level will pick them and run with it. But the testing is missing, the experimentation is missing, right? And to see if the customers even like it, right? And then you have to through this process, you have to do validation. We write hypothesis, so you want to make sure you validate the idea to see if it's going to work and what phase is it at. So it is a process that takes time, but it's an iterative process. So it's not that this is the right idea. Sometimes the idea that you end up picking also changes, right? To conform to what the new data that you collected. So that's what you really want to make sure that you're doing, not fixated on this is the idea and this is how we're going to execute it. It usually doesn't work that way.
Got it. So what do you do after the hypothesis stage?
Yeah, absolutely. So if enough data comes in where you can, you know, support it, and your hypothesis validates the idea, then obviously you can take it to the development phase and develop the idea more and take it to commercialization phase.
Got it. Well, so when you get to the commercialization phase, the marketplace is really, really noisy. So I'm curious, you know, given some of your background in marketing and working with your customers on marketing their products and their innovations, how can the business leader differentiate that product, service, or company in the crowded space?
Yeah, so today, I mean, I think years ago, you can really focus on an innovative idea for companies to have that as a main focus and say, we're going to get this really cool project out and it's going to make us X amount of money. Today, I feel that, you know, the mind shift has to change from going for a innovative product to an innovative company, innovative organization. And that starts with the innovative culture. And that if we can fix that part where you have an organization with an innovative culture, then you're automatically differentiating yourself in the market, because now your whole culture is aligned. And now that they're constantly looking at new innovations and looking for new growth and exploring new opportunities, right? So it's not about doing it one time and creating that great innovation strategy. It's about, you know, how are we going to get all the divisions, all the teams aligned so that every aspect of the organization is innovative and is adding value to the organization, whether it's innovation through processes, right, through structure, through new products and services, building new channels to reach the customers. That's what it really is going to add value and have an impact, and allow the company to survive long term.
That makes sense. So I do have a question from Jane, and she's wondering about the idea of innovation and how it applies to internal customers. So she says co-creation and collaboration is critical within an organization. So to your internal customers. So how would we go about processing innovations to serve our employees, for example, or our other internal customers? How would it be different potentially?
Yeah, I don't think it would be different. I think it would be the same, right? You're involving your internal employees and having an ideation workshop with them and taking them through the steps, right? You want to make sure that you start off with what problem are you trying to solve, right? You need something that you're solving for so that you can collect ideas that support that. And again, clustering those ideas, walking through them, and really having some experts weigh in on, what's going to work, having some validations, writing hypothesis is going to help you make the necessary changes and see what's going to work within your internal teams.
That makes sense. So I have another question for you. So rather than focusing on problems to solve, Greg is saying he likes to use active, positive language like challenges to overcome, opportunities to pursue, risks to manage. What do you think about that?
So, I mean, I think on a personal level, I believe that whenever you use positive language, it's really going to bring out a different outcome in the person that you're talking to, right? Because they're really focusing on the fact that I think it's going to work. There's a possibility that, we're going to be able to move forward. You're not issue focused, right? When you use negative language, that can, trigger alarms in someone that is actually doing work, then they're going to second guess, are they going to be able to do it? So really encouraging employees with obviously, positive action words will help create the response that you're looking forward to.
That's helpful. There's a comment here from Gloria, and she's mentioning that it's interesting to listen to the innovations and strategies. And it seems like it's really focused on business. And I think maybe possibly, even though there's not a question here, I'm kind of reading a question here. So even though healthcare is a business, there are certain lines that should not be crossed. So Bella, I'm curious, do you agree with that? Can healthcare be innovative and have strategies to innovate, or do you think that there are some lines that healthcare can't cross?
So in terms of healthcare, so I come from healthcare industry. So I was in pharma for 18 years more, and then life sciences for 20 plus years. Pharma has, and healthcare, I've even worked in a hospital, has a lot of regulations and they need to be followed, right? They're there for the safety of the employees, for the safety of the patients and their data, and et cetera. And I believe that, you need to have these boundaries in place so that we're not crossing any lines, right? So when it comes to innovation or something, you're not accidentally, sharing data that you shouldn't have been sharing because you created a new app or new telehealth, application where you're trying to get your patients and doctors connected, right? Because you still have to follow a lot of the regulatory rules. And speaking of healthcare and their regulatory processes, I do want to mention that, one of the things that, when you have larger companies, that innovation governance is something that's, missing, that a lot of companies don't think about. And it's the same thing where financial companies have regulatory process in place so that they're not misbehaving with the money, or the money's not being mishandled. There needs to be a governance also for companies where when you're working on innovation projects, you set boundaries, right? You elect the person who's going to actually run the innovation programs and making sure that they're aligned with the company goals and understanding what the budget are for these divisions. So governance, I think, should be applied everywhere, right? Because you already see it in different industries like aviation with their safety, and healthcare with their regulatory processes, and pharma with meeting FDA's the process and the expectations and their deadlines. So it's something important that every company should think about, and they should definitely have.
So that's the third word that I forgot. So when you're looking at strategy and innovation, it's strategy and management and governance to ensure that you're meeting all those regulatory requirements.
Yes, you have to meet all three. You want to, in order to be innovative company, you should have all three, right? You should have a process in place, which is an innovation process that helps you take an idea to execution. You should have the governance in place so that you're just not building ideas for today, but you're also building ideas for tomorrow. You're building that portfolio. There's someone in charge, and then you have set the boundaries and you have the right metrics to measure these projects on how they're doing and, how they're growing. And definitely, the culture, right? The dynamic culture on how they're helping and what capabilities and what talent are they bringing to the table. We talked about the CTO, right? What are they bringing to the table so that you can explore new opportunities?
That's super helpful. So I want to take a moment to share with everyone ways that they can stay in touch with you and your work, Bella, and some follow-up items from today. Um, and just need to get to that really fast. And so we would love to have you all stay in touch with Bella after today's event. And one of the ways that you can do that is through buying the book. We would love to have you take that next step to buy The Innovative Executive. And you can get it on Amazon or your other favorite online retailers. And I noticed that Wendy was putting in the chat information about buying the book in bulk. So in the event that you want to explore the idea of innovation within your organization, you could buy multiple copies of the book and then talk through the concepts and how you can apply them. You can also, if you've already bought the book and read the book, we would welcome and appreciate your review on Amazon, which helps other readers find the book. We also have a free downloadable resource for you today, and Wendy is putting that link in the chat. It's called The 5 Key Disciplines Needed for Business Growth and Innovation. And Bella is sharing some great wisdom in that free resource, and we would invite you to download that. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, but I want to mention again that Bella has this amazing podcast, The Innovative Executive, where she brings regular inspiration and content to add value to people who are really thinking about how they can innovate and lead intelligently in the age of disruption. So we would welcome you to follow up with all of those next steps with Bella. And then Bella, I know you have some parting thoughts for us today.
Yeah, I wanted to leave you with one thought, and that is that, what one of the things I've seen a lot when we talk about innovation with companies is that they don't have a framework and they don't have any written processes down. So the thought that I want to leave you is that you should definitely try new models and frameworks for innovation in order to learn and succeed. So by trying these new models, you actually get to observe the results, right? You get to do the experimentation with these new models, and only then you'll be able to embark on a positive learning journey to create long-term success. Um, so thank you so much, Becky, for having me here.